everyone. Welcome back to the CONVO Couch. I am Fiorella Isabel. Pasta and I will be on together a little bit later. But first, I have a very special guest. She is a young woman and she is running for Congress against Nancy Pelosi's seat in District 12. I have Agatha Bacelar here with me. Thank you, Agatha,
Hi,
for being here.
thanks so much for having me.
So I've heard a few things about you from several people in the Democratic Party. A lot of comparisons towards Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm sure you're tired of hearing it, but I kind of wanted to get to know a little bit more about you, how old you are, and kind of like your background and why you're running to start.
Mhm. So I'm 27 years old. I am originally from Brazil, and I am running because, well, first of all, about social impact and the lives of other people, all the many different ways you can live on this earth. But particularly for the last 5 years, I was working for a social justice organization where I was doing documentary storytelling and political advocacy around issues related to education, immigration, criminal justice, the environment. And most of my work was out of the office and on the ground with the people and in the places where I think justice is most urgently needed. And I just saw too much suffering and a political climate that is not listening to the people that need the most help. And I also wanted to couple that with my experience studying technology and being from the Bay Area. And I just looked around San Francisco and felt like, this is such a young, diverse, technologically advanced place, and we need political leadership to take us there. And I feel like it's our generation that needs to lead the way on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure you very much know about the housing and homelessness crisis California is facing here in Los Angeles. It's gotten out of control. Tell me a little bit more about how that's impacted your quest to finding a reason to run for office.
Yeah, I think there's typically a reality that exists in Congress that doesn't match the reality on the ground of the everyday experiences of people. Um, and I'm someone that likes to get close and get to know the stories of people and how they got in those situations. And I think right now we have, yeah, this disconnect. And so I feel like we need to be doing more around healthcare. I mean, not being able to pay, going to the hospital and having a bill that's too expensive can end you up in the street. Like when you fall here, you fall really hard. Or looking at how politicians might be influenced based on who their donor base is something that I would really like to change, and even how, you know, economic system and be more helpful to people who are experiencing homelessness.
And absolutely. And what is your political, I guess, stance? Do you consider yourself a progressive? Do you consider yourself someone that's, on the left?
Yes, both of those things. Yes, I'm a progressive.
And what was your experience? I know you attended the California Democratic Convention. What
Mhm.
did you feel like was the thing that stood out to you the most in regards to the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I had never been to one before, and so it was a really eye-opening experience to see thousands of people who are really passionate and want to push things forward. But it was interesting to see the different factions or how people responded on the fact that I was running based on where I was. So, for example, if I was at the Progressive Caucus, people would be so excited and hopeful and say, "Yes, thank you. How do I help?" Um, and then in other places, it was more like, "Hmm, good luck with that."
Yeah. Yeah.
But and a few times, um, people were standoffish, but then later either came up to me in person or emailed me afterwards and said, "Hey, I can't express my views publicly because of my position XYZ, but I think what you're doing is really important, and I'd like to help you." Um, so that was interesting, but it's a whole other world, and one of the things that I'm trying to bridge is um, how everyday people, I mean, especially people in my generation, we care so much. We're so connected. We're so knowledgeable. And yet politics seems like something you don't even want to touch with a long stick. And so, how do you bridge that information gap and get people to want to be involved, get involved in their local organizing groups, Democratic Party, and elections.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people that are our generation are not interested in voting or politics because they feel like it's a lost cause. They feel like it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
this generation, millennials generations, are the ones that are suffering the most under student debt, under not having good enough paying jobs out there for the degrees that they've spent their money on. And of course, like you mentioned, lacking in healthcare. So, how would you approach getting someone that's, in a 20 something or a young person in their 30s to actually come out and vote, because they are so kind of like jaded by the whole system, and 2016 jaded even more people, who went out and voted and their vote didn't count and so on. How do
Mhm.
you think is what way could we navigate to find a solution to that?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that. So one is I actually spent a month and a half before the midterms before 2018, registering people to vote across the country, and we were mostly focused on young people or immigrant communities. So I had thousands of conversations with people about why they weren't voting, or if they were, why. Why were they hopeful? What was the state of the country and democracy, and what were they looking for? So I feel like I just have a lot of practice on that. And if I do meet someone who's not registered to vote, I just come in with that passion and make them feel important by why it's so necessary and how we can get you registered right away. But on a more systemic level, I completely understand. I think quite literally our voice and our vote doesn't often matter because we are being drowned out by corporate money or big money in politics. And the way our system, I mean, we have our general election, especially for president, it's a show. Like the way our delegate system works
Mm-hmm.
and the electoral college. Yeah, we've been disappointed so many times. So one of the things I like to talk about is my experience as both a constituent and someone working on advocacy. So something that I found personally really frustrating. I've been advocating for the DREAM Act, pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, since I was in high school. It's been a long time, and it's not here. And I'm frustrated by how even when something like that makes logical or economic sense, even if every poll shows that 85% of Americans agree with a pathway to citizenship, even if a majority of Congress would vote for it, it still gets stuck. And there's no real accountability or way to show majority interest. The way that we conduct politics today is so old fashioned. This notion that we show up in person every few years to cast a ballot is not up to speed with how we communicate and operate in every other aspect of our lives. So, one thing that I would love to do is to be a member of Congress that makes decisions informed by how constituents vote on a secure, open source digital platform. And that's not ready yet, that's in the future, but I think it would do a lot to show accountability. Something that I hear a lot from politicians is either we love social media, it's a way to get our message out and connect with people, but there's no way to tell whether we're interacting with a Russian troll or a Sybil that has multiple accounts for one person. You can't verify someone's identity. And so building better communication tools to interact would be so needed. And then the other thing we hear is from politicians is, oh, I can't vote on that because people in my district don't want that. And yet there's no real way of proving that, and everyone's district is so different.
Yeah.
You just take their word for it.
So, I know you're kind of involved in tech. I read about you introducing an app for your campaign. Is that something you guys are still planning on doing?
Yes, it's something that's happening in parallel, I would say, with the campaign. I, as a candidate, don't have the bandwidth to be developing an app and spearheading that,
Mm-hmm.
but there are people around me in my network who come from the tech world and are committed to like this is one of the biggest problems we need to address. And so, yes, it's being built. In the meantime, one of the things I learned is that once you file for candidacy officially with the FEC, you get an inbound of emails from software providers that try to sell you demos and subscriptions to NGP Van, Nation Builder, like all of these products. And they cost so much money for sometimes simple tools, and they don't communicate with each other. And so I think we do have a long way to go in how
Mhm.
to upgrade technology in the campaign world.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders has they just
Mhm.
introduced like an actual app for the campaign, and it seems very helpful actually to kind of have all that information there, especially when you're out there trying to talk to people, trying to um, give them information. They're going to ask questions. They're going to ask where
Mhm.
you stand on these issues. So honestly, I think that's a really great idea. I think that's an idea that the millennials and the younger generations can bring into it, because these politicians have no idea how we just rely on apps so much. I mean, there's an
Mhm.
app for everything. I use apps for everything. And I think if you can engage people in that way, then you can probably get more of the youth vote. A lot of people focus on getting the votes of traditional people that vote, but I think there needs to be a switch into getting the non-voters and the
Yes,
and the youth.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It just happened to me the other morning, or I guess it's been a few weeks now, when HR 6 was going through the House. I woke up. The first thing I saw on my phone was a text from United We Dream that said, "Now's the time. Go call your member of Congress." And even for this issue that I've been working so hard on and care so much about, I was exhausted, and I was just like, "Really? Is calling still the only thing that I can do to
Yeah.
express what I want?" And usually it goes to a voicemail box, or you
Yeah.
don't see the other side of that. And so we're limited to calling or marching on the street or waiting an entire election cycle. And so, yes, upgrading, having more real time feedback is helpful. Another example I can give is so I volunteer with Crisis Text Line, and one of the things that they say is how this. So it's a platform, a texting platform where people can go to if they're in a moment of crisis or need mental help. And the CDC publishes their mental health data every 2 years, whereas Crisis Text Line, because it's all text based and in real time, publish their data every 30 seconds. So I think examples like that are really inspiring.
Awesome. Those are all great ideas. What is your domestic platform about? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I believe in doing dramatic climate action. I don't think it's an issue. I think it's an emergency. I believe in getting big money out of politics. I believe in having single payer healthcare, Medicare for all. Um, and I would say a root, I mean, there's so many things I could talk about, immigration, education,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think big money in politics is a root cause that underlies so many things and distinguishes me from the incumbent as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And she's been there for a while, and a lot of people aren't happy. So, it's really nice to have refreshing voices in it. I know right now during the this Trump administration, we're facing a lot of issues with foreign policy, foreign diplomacy. We're seeing Donald Trump campaign as a non-interventionist candidate. However, he's been anything but. He's been pretty much trying to get us into wars, sanctions
Mhm.
with Venezuela, sanctions in Iraq. What is your stance on war, and what's your opinion on so far how the U.S. has engaged in imperialism throughout the world?
Mhm. Yeah, I overall think that we should reduce our military budget and try to intervene less, but I also have a humanitarian outlook where, for example, in Venezuela, there are over 1 million refugees. There are people who are starving. I'm originally from Brazil. I'm Latin American, so I have so many friends telling me what's going on in Venezuela, and it's really disturbing. So I would, and what's going on in Venezuela in particular, one person, a dictator, used the people's resource of and oil to get the country 50 to $100 billion in debt, and now the U.S. is saying, "Oh, don't worry, Russia and China, we're going to guarantee that debt no matter what." And I think that is unfair, and we shouldn't intervene in that way. But if there is a refugee crisis or a massacre going on, absolutely, I think we should have some sort of presence. And sometimes military power is not always violent. There's soft power ways of getting involved. Um, that's my overall stance.
And well, you're from Brazil, so you're familiar with what's going on with Bolsonaro and Lula?
Yeah. hmm Um, I can just, okay.
Yeah, just your
Yeah,
opinion
so,
on that.
right. I am personally very scared of Bolsonaro, and it's interesting to see how the media plays out because I have a WhatsApp group with my family in Brazil that sends me 80 messages a day about what's
Mm,
going on there.
yeah,
And um, most of my family is for him, and I find it's just very curious to me. Um, and grew up I grew up being told that Lula was dangerous or not
right.
good, and then now as an adult, in my own education and how I read the news, I struggle with that, and I'm torn because he did so much to alleviate poverty, and when I see him as an organizer and I see his speeches, I'm just like, wow. And The Intercept just released. Um, they got a hold of signal messages between Moro, the uh, what do you call it in America? The Chief Justice. He's
Mm-hmm.
a major figure in the Justice Department in Brazil,
Okay,
and how he was colluding with Bolsonaro the entire time
absolutely.
um, to frame Lula as having been bribed, and yeah, so it's
It
very fraught.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I'm very much like you. I grew up thinking that certain people were bad. And in South America, my family is from Peru. So
Mm-hmm.
then I started kind of learning a little bit more about foreign policy, and a lot of the things we know here, that a lot of the information we get from Western capitalism is not necessarily accurate. And like the more I have like read and engaged in foreign policy and learned more about the journalism that's over there, the more distrusting I've become about what the US considers, who the US considers their enemy. And so it's something that I'm constantly educating myself, and I think it's something that we're going to need in our leaders to continue to get educated on. A lot of us don't even have time to look up and be involved in anything outside of domestic policy because we're so busy trying to afford our rent or trying to just
Mm-hmm.
keep up. And
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why there's that kind of disconnect, because a lot of people aren't educated because there's just no emphasis in it from our media. And I think also that has to change. We need to be more open and diplomatic and talking to people that like we may not consider necessarily the best people, like Assad in Syria, but the attacks were proven to be false. So it's kind of this thing. And then we go back to the Iraq War. So it's one of those things that I think
Mm-hmm.
like we all have the ability to learn a little bit more on and kind of like advance. And the more I study, the more I'm like blown away. It's crazy. It's absolutely
Yeah.
crazy.
And yeah,
Go
there's a
ahead.
lot to
Yeah.
yeah to be said also about how we're getting our information. Something that's a big topic here is um, regulating tech companies, or one of I don't feel like Russia hacked our elections. I feel like they used the tools as they were designed and built to be used. They
Right.
bought advertising that was allowed,
Yeah.
and so when you allow that kind of misinformation, it's so dangerous, and we can't it's anti-democratic to have so much power. I mean, where we hold democracy today is on apps and on these tools like Facebook and Twitter, and I think it is getting to the stage where it's a public utility. It's how we communicate and operate our democracy is just as important as access to clean water and our electricity system. So figuring a way to monitor and regulate that is priority.
So I know you're pretty aware of the political scene here in the United States. What is your opinion on the presidential election, and who did you vote for 4 years ago?
Okay, so I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary, and then for Hillary when she was the nominee.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped out on both campaigns as a volunteer in a few different ways. Um, and then for today's presidential, I'm excited to see a lot of different candidates. I'm very excited for the debate coming up. And I think a lot of them have to offer. I'm still a fan of Bernie's. He's the most progressive candidate in the race. I'm excited to see another a progressive like Elizabeth Warren, who's a woman who has such detailed plans and is a policy wonk, but is making it cool for everyday people to get into. Um, I listen to Pete Buttigieg. I think he's interesting how he communicates. I've been following universal basic income since way before Andrew Yang was popular. So I'm so excited that he's talking about that. Who else? Yeah, those are a few
Yeah.
highlights.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And how do you feel about the plan to cancel student debt that both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have introduced?
Yeah, I am in favor of it. Um, I we had what was it called? The Student Debt Abuse Prevention Act that made student debt. You can never cancel it, even if you file for bankruptcy. It's still going to haunt you for the rest of your life.
Right. Right.
And that was a strategic move. And I think if we're going to, so this plan is the who it would harm are shareholders of banks. And are you going to cripple the next generation of people, of students, or lenders? So I'm in favor of supporting students. And it's we're crippled by it. And even if you are a capitalist, you still want people to have liquid assets and money to spend on our economy. So I think, yeah, I'm for it.
Awesome. Awesome. And is there anything else that I guess stands you out from other people running? Besides that, you're very young and you're a woman, which is great because Nancy Pelosi, it's been a lot of, I was involved in helping out a few candidates run the last time around for her seat, but it was just too many progressives aiming for the same seat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what, I mean, how can we kind of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party kind of come together and maybe like, find consensuses into pushing maybe one candidate eventually? Like, do you see yourself in the future involved in politics outside of this?
Yeah. So, and to go back slightly on the presidential candidate question,
Mm-hmm.
I think what I would be most excited about is not just the one person that makes it to the seat, but who galvanizes the people to get
Mm-hmm.
involved. And so, similarly in this race, I want it to be a people-powered movement. And yes, I saw what happened last time. I think one thing that makes me different is one, yes, you mentioned being a woman. California right now, we have two female senators. San Francisco has a female mayor. Our representative is the first female Speaker of the House. And San Francisco still needs to lead. If we want gender parity in Congress, we have to get more women elected. And San Francisco, because other places are still behind, needs to have a female representative and continue that legacy of strong female leadership. Also, I think it's important that I have spent a lot of time abroad, not just being born in Brazil, but in college, I spent every internship working in China, working in a factory in China to understand what it means for us to manufacture things abroad. What is the toll on human work labor there and on the environment? I worked in India for 3 months, in Cambodia, in Kenya, and I studied various languages. So I think the ability to connect with people of all different cultures and even speak their language, I think is so important. So people feel seen and that they are reflected in their representation. But I would like to figure out a system where the progressives ahead of the primary can rally around one candidate. I would absolutely be open to that.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, if we really want to, get more of our people in there, we kind of need to communicate and work together and find,
Mm-hmm.
a way towards the victory, which is what we want. And we are seeing more and more people come into Congress, more and more progressives, more and more women,
Mm-hmm.
especially women of
Mm-hmm.
color. So it's good, it's progress, but at the same time, it's slow. And you're right, we do need someone that can mobilize people, that has that momentum. I genuinely believe that Bernie Sanders is the one to beat Trump. I just look at the difference in
Mhm.
polling between him and Trump. It's the largest. So,
Mhm.
uh, that's just kind of my take on it. But is there a way we can reach you on social media? Do you have your
Yeah.
website, your
Mhm.
links?
Yeah, my website is agathaforcongress.com, and we are going to be rolling out a video and more platform positions later this week. So look out for that. And on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Agatha Bacelar, or on Instagram at Aggie Bacelar, Aggie Bacelar.
Awesome, Agatha. It was nice meeting you. Sorry,
Yeah,
you couldn't see me, but you look
no
great.
worries.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
talking with me.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
I appreciate
Cheers.
it. Thanks, Agatha. Bye. Thanks.